The party that changed everything. The Shire was alive with celebration. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting warm light over the lush green hills. Hobbits sang, danced, and feasted as Bilbo Baggins' 111th birthday party reached its peak. Frodo laughed alongside Sam by the buffet table, their plates piled high with mushroom pie and roasted pork. Gandalf stood off to the side, puffing on his pipe, his eyes gleaming with a mysterious light. In the centre of the party, Bilbo tapped his wineglass with a spoon, calling for attention. "My dear Bagginses, Tooks, Brandy Bucks, and everyone else," he announced, his voice carrying over the festive noise. The crowd quieted, turning toward him with eager anticipation. "I've lived a long and adventurous life," Bilbo began, his tone unusually sombre, "and tonight I have a surprise for all of you." As he spoke, Bilbo's hand slipped into his coat pocket, his fingers brushing against the one ring. But instead of the familiar comfort it usually brought, a sudden strange compulsion seized him. His fingers trembled as they left the ring behind and closed around the cold metal grip of something else. A Colt 1911 semi-automatic handgun. Bilbo blinked, his eyes wide with confusion as he withdrew the weapon. The festive crowd gasped in unison, staring in shock at the strange object gleaming in his hand. I don't understand," Bilbo stammered, his voice cracking. "Bilbo?" Frodo called out, concern etched across his face. "What are you doing? What is that?" Bilbo's face twisted, sweat beading on his brow. I don't know," he cried. His hands moved seemingly of their own accord, raising the weapon and aiming it directly at Frodo. "Uncle!" Frodo shouted, panic surging through his voice. Before anyone could react, a deafening bang echoed across the party. Frodo's body jerked backward, and he crumpled to the ground. The world seemed to stop. "Frodo!" Sam screamed, dropping his plate and rushing to his friend's side. He knelt beside Frodo, cradling his lifeless head in his hands. "What have you done, Mr. Bilbo?" Bilbo stood frozen, staring at the gun in his trembling hands. No, I didn't mean to. I couldn't stop," he whispered, his voice quivering with disbelief. He dropped the gun as if it burned him and stared at his hands in horror. "What have I done?" The crowd erupted into chaos. Hobbits screamed and fled, overturning tables and spilling ale. Amidst the chaos, Gandalf remained eerily calm, his lips moving in hushed murmurs. His hands traced strange patterns in the air, his eyes fixed on Bilbo. As the uproar subsided, Gandalf's muttering ceased. His voice boomed, cutting through the din. "Enough!" he bellowed, his staff glowing faintly. He strode forward, his robes billowing behind him like a storm cloud. Reaching Frodo's side, Gandalf knelt down, brushing Sam aside gently. "Let me tend to him," he said, his voice firm but calm. "You'd better fix this, Gandalf," Sam shouted, tears streaming down his face. "You're a wizard, ain't you? Do something!" Gandalf leaned over Frodo, his hand hovering above the hobbit's forehead. His staff began to glow brighter, the air around them crackling with energy. "Melanahiria Esteluvaland," he chanted, his voice low and melodic. The light from Gandalf's staff engulfed Frodo, and the wound on his head began to close, the blood fading as if it had never been there. Frodo's eyes fluttered open, his chest rising with a shaky breath. "He's alive!" Sam cried, gripping Frodo's hand. "Frodo, you're alive!" The crowd, now cautiously returning, erupted into cheers. Gandalf stood, the glow fading from his staff as he turned to face the crowd. "The boy lives," he declared, his voice filled with solemn pride. "Thanks to the powers granted to me." As the hobbits cheered his name, Gandalf's face darkened for the briefest of moments. Beneath the raucous applause, his lips curled into the faintest smirk. Only he knew the truth. The hex he had placed on Bilbo, planted deep in the old hobbit's mind, worked perfectly. Bilbo had been compelled to fire the gun, setting the stage for Gandalf to swoop in as the saviour. Frodo, now alive but shaken, looked at Bilbo, who sat on the ground sobbing, his hands clutching his head. "I didn't mean to," Bilbo whimpered. "I don't know what came over me." "It's not your fault, Bilbo," Gandalf said, his voice dripping with false. "Sometimes dark forces cloud our judgment. But what matters now is that Frodo is safe." The party dispersed, the crowd whispering tales of Gandalf's miraculous magic. Frodo sat quietly, still dazed, as Sam fussed over him. Bilbo remained on the ground, inconsolable. And Gandalf, the orchestrator of it all, stood tall in the fading light, his shadow stretching long across the Shire.